Welcome to the Glenn Mercer Show, where we talk all things vegan. If you're not already vegan, no worries, we'll get you there. If you are, tune in for health advice, information on climate change, and all the damage done by our most destructive industry, animal agriculture. We'll also talk cooking, theater, film, and culture. My 2 reasons for starting this podcast: to entertain, to inform, and to make people vegan. Oh, that's 3. Shit. Welcome to the Glenn Mercer Show. You could find us across all your favorite podcast platforms. You could find us on YouTube. And please remember to subscribe. I'm trying to get to 2 million subscribers. I'm a little bit shy. And you could find us at realmeneatplants.com. My guest today is a national weight building champion. He is also the champion of being the guest most often on the Glenn Mercer Show. So he holds that record. He has started vegan muscle building championships and competitions, I should say. And Geoff Palmer, you are also the founder of cleanmachineonline.com. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, and I've never known you as shy, but that's okay.
Yes. Well, I'm a little bit shy. Now, we are going to be talking cancer today, and since I'm not a doctor and you're not a doctor, it behooves me to make this little disclaimer, which is that nothing we say shall be taken as medical advice. This conversation is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to treat, cure, or prevent any disease. If you have any serious health problems, please speak with your physician. Geoff and I are just self-styled health researchers without the requisite degrees to consult with anybody on their serious health conditions. So, Geoff, having said that, as a self-styled health researcher, you know more than lots of people. And that's why I enjoy talking to you so much, because you have a wealth of nutritional information. So let's talk about cancer. Now, when I became a vegetarian and then a vegan, it was because of heart disease. I knew, I think I knew in part by instinct as a teenager, and then from reading the science as I got older, that the whole food vegan diet, and especially a low-fat whole food vegan diet, is the way to avoid heart disease. But I always had the attitude that cancer is a matter of luck. It's, or bad luck. You could breathe it in. It could be in your genes. But as I've learned more, I've learned that this same diet that protects us from heart disease, is a pretty good help to prevent cancer. What do you have to say about that?
Absolutely. There are so many different pathways to both the development and the growth and the metastasization or the spreading of cancer. It's a very, very complex topic. So what I'd like to talk about is just some of those pathways that are contributed to or even not contributed to by the choices of food that we put in our mouth. There are reasons for, there's genetic cancers, there's cancers that come with birth. So those are much different than what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about dietary induced and dietary protected, and even dietary reversed cancers. So reversing cancers through diet. It's pretty fascinating subject once you get into it. And again, I'll be citing the research as we go. So I'll be telling you the title of the study as we talk about them, and then I'll be quoting directly from the study. So I'm not speaking out of turn. These are not my words. There'll be direct quotes from the research themselves, the studies themselves.
All right. And it's the case, isn't it, that we all have cancer cells in our body, and it's just a question of whether they grow and how we process them?
Yeah, and so what is a cancer cell? Well, some of them are genetic, where the gene has been destroyed, like by radiation can be an example. Radiation will go in and mess up the genetic code. Well, when the cell starts copying itself, it's copying the flaw in the genetic code, and this can be one type of recognized cancer. Another is the stimulation of growth of a cell that doesn't need to grow. If you have cell signalers like methionine or steroid hormones that cause cells to grow, or IGF-1, which cause cells to grow, if you are saying grow, 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 and the cell's saying, wait a minute, I don't need to grow. There's no real purpose for me to grow. Yet you keep sending that message to the cell that this is way oversimplifying. It's much more complicated than this, but to try to put it in communicable form on a podcast, it's basically telling the cell to grow, grow, grow. It's saying no, 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 and then finally says, okay, you want me to grow? It turns on this gene we now loosely call the oncogene, which causes rapid cellular growth. So there's two ways of growth: growth in the cell size and then growth in multiple cells. So growth in a cell size happens when cell function doesn't happen properly. And this is the cancer cell. Now, cancer cells generally are recognized by our body. We have many mechanisms in place to recognize when cells become aberrant, unhealthy, not working properly, and go in and what we call apoptize them, or kill them, explode them basically, and destroy their parts and recycle them. So this is a natural process that happens all the time. Cells dysfunction, and we break them down and build new ones. What happens though is if you do that with a lot of cells, they start to multiply faster than potentially the body can eliminate. It's a race. It's a race to the finish line. Now, what happens is when we're eating, we're putting the same food that may trigger that grows to a lot of different cells at once. So much so that it may not be able for our body to overcome this process or intervene in this process. If we eat just a little bit of it once in a while, our body can usually take care of business pretty efficiently and effectively. It's that constant putting in of every meal, meat products, dairy products, egg products that have these growth signalers like methionine, like IGF-1, like hormones in them that actually keep pounding away at the cells saying grow, 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 and the body just can't deal with that.
All right. Well, let's talk about that amino acid, methionine, which is present in some healthy foods like beans,
Yes.
but is present in abundance in animal foods, in animal protein. So tell us about methionine and its relation to cancer.
Okay, but before we even get
Okay.
into the cancer part of it, I want to talk about something that research has found pretty unequivocal. Methionine restriction. Okay. Methionine restriction, first we looked at calorie restriction, and we pretty much proved without a doubt in almost every species, from single-celled all the way up to human beings, always calorie restrictions extends lifespan in animals. So knowing that, we dug deeper and said, well, what's the mechanism here? And they found protein restriction actually extended lifespan. Now, there was a little asterisk by that, because it wasn't just protein restriction, it was animal protein restriction that extended life. Now, why the difference? Why did plant protein not result in the same thing as animal protein restriction? Okay, because the methionine levels are much higher in animal proteins. Why is that? Okay, plants don't need a whole lot of methionine. to grow. Animals do. And a baby human being starts out at about 8 to 10 pounds and grows to about 30 pounds in 12 months. In that same period, a cow can go from 60 pounds to 300 pounds. So that's a lot of cell growth. So their cow's milk is loaded with methionine because it's trying to feed all these cells to grow rapidly, very fast, and a lot. Human beings don't grow very fast, and we don't grow a lot. It takes us 18 years to get to full maturation. Most animals get there within a couple of years, some in a matter of months. So they do it very quickly and then stall. All right. So they have higher methionine levels in their tissues than we do. We have lower methionine levels because we don't need to grow as much. Now, when you take that animal flesh full of methionine and put it into our body, now you've flooded with the grow methionine in there. Now, this speeds up the cells. It gets them to produce more proteins and run faster. Think of it as like jet fuel. Okay. Jet fuel in a jet is great because it's going to go really fast and, go. But jet fuel in a car is not so good. It'll cause it to explode. But just think of it this way. If you are sedentary and you are telling your cells to grow, but you're not having a reason, you're not exercising, so you're not replacing cells, you're not, burning up cells because you've damaged them, you don't have a reason for the cells to grow. So if your car is sitting in the garage, this is basically like a sedentary person, and you put the gas pedal to the metal, it's going to blow out what? A lot of waste product. This waste product, what does it do? It becomes toxic, right? Carbon monoxide to fill it, and it can kill you. Well, that same process is happening in our cells. If you put jet fuel in the cells and rev up the metabolism, it's going to create what's called ROS, or radical oxygen species. These damage cells, and cause also damage DNA. And remember what we said about cancer is that damaged DNA. As soon as that DNA is damaged, it starts copying itself and making damaged versions of cells, or unhealthy or cancer cells. So this is the whole process of how we're doing this. So let me read this study. It says the low methionine content of vegan diets may make methionine restriction feasible as a life extension strategy. This is a 2009 study, and I'll directly quote. Whole food vegan diets that are moderate in bean and soy intake, while including ample amounts of fruit, can be quite low in methionine. We used to think this is a bad thing, right? Oh, plant proteins are too low in methionine, therefore they're incomplete, right? No, we now know that lower methionine is actually better. Okay, furthermore, low-fat vegan diets coupled with exercise, remember, exercise is giving your body a reason to make new cells, can be expected to promote longevity. There it is, boom, pure and simple. Now, we now know that restricting methionine in the diet can be accomplished simply by switching from high methionine animal proteins to low methionine plant proteins, therefore extending life. You add exercise to this, and you have even a better potential for maximum longevity.
Are there any plant proteins that you would advise people not to overindulge in because they're high in methionine?
So nuts generally tend to be a little bit higher in methionine, but look at the weight. When you see somebody eating nuts, what do you eat? A handful of nuts in a sitting? Maybe once a day at that. Nuts are higher in methionine. So if you're a very active person, a handful of nuts will serve you well because it'll boost your methionine levels a little bit, but not out of the range. We've seen study after study after study showing that actually nuts do increase longevity, are associated with longevity, and study after study in human studies. So it's not a little bit, some of the time, if you're active, it's that high amounts of methionine from meat, from eggs, from dairy, from fish, all actually eggs and fish are the highest in methionine of the foods we intake, quote unquote, healthier foods. No, they're not. All right. So now that we see that limiting methionine, we know without a doubt increases longevity. And I'll quote this one because it's pretty powerful too. So this study is called mitochondrial. That's the little powerhouses that create all the ATP for every cell in our body. Mitochondrial oxidative stress, aging, and caloric restriction. The protein and methionine connection. Okay, this direct quote from the study. I'm just going to read it to you, then we'll talk about it. Thus, methionine restriction seems to be responsible for the decrease in radical oxygen species production observed during caloric restriction. This is interesting because it is known that exactly that procedure of methionine restriction also increases maximum longevity. All these suggest that methionine level is involved in the control of mitochondrial oxidative stress and vertebrate longevity by at least two different mechanisms, decreasing the sensitivity of the proteins to oxidative damage and lowering the rate of ROS generation by the mitochondria. So it's doing two things. It's actually, by lowering that, you're actually reducing the sensitivity of the cell to be damaged. It's more easily damaged, and you're also reducing the amount of damage happening to the cell. So it's really clear and very well accepted in the scientific community that simply reducing your levels of methionine can extend lifespan. And we know the way to do that, simply switching to a plant-based diet. Pretty simple.
And not overdoing the nuts, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. Are there certain beans that are higher in methionine?
A little bit, but not anything to concerned about. Remember, methionine is an essential amino acid, so we do need it in our diet. I don't want to make methionine bad. It's all about the quantity of the methionine. Some methionine is required by the human body for proper function and health. Too much methionine is when it becomes a problem.
Are there any other amino acids that are implicated in cancer in excess?
So methionine is an interesting one. It's called a sulfur amino acid, and there are two of them, methionine and cysteine. But in the human body, methionine can be converted to cysteine, and cysteine can be converted to methionine. So they're interchangeable along with homocysteine. So it's a cycle. They can be converted in there. So a lot of times when you see methionine written, you see cysteine written right by it, or / cysteine, because they're kind of considered one and the same. So you want to choose foods that are generally a little bit lower, but you don't even have to go that far. All you have to do is just eat plants and you're there.
And I assume this is why the meat-based diet generates higher homocysteine in the body, right?
This is also true. Now, homocysteine can be elevated in people not taking vitamin B12 as well, because vitamin B12 does detoxify and eliminate, help the body process out homocysteine so it doesn't become dangerous. Homocysteine is implicated, as you well know, in cardiovascular disease.
Right.
So we got a dual effect here of methionine. Okay. That would be good enough to just to restrict it for longevity purposes, or not do it because of homocysteine, because of the heart attacks. So you've got heart attacks, the #1 cause of death of people in the United States, and you've got longevity. So that should be enough, but boom, now you've got cancers too. And this is where it gets really interesting. Okay. I want everybody listening to this, if you're listening to this, please spread this information because, one, Glenn's a nice guy and I want to see him succeed. And he's a great champion for this movement, but I want more people to have this information so they know how to potentially avoid health problems that you don't need to just because you don't know. My heart breaks for people who are suffering and just don't know because they don't have this information. Okay. I want everybody at home to type in these 3 words. Methionine, and it's spelled Methionine, methionine. Methionine dependent cancer. You type that into Google and you're going to see a whole list of strategies actually removing methionine from the diet to starve out cancer cells. Cancer cells, we now know, feed on methionine. In the science community, they call it methionine, cellular methionine addiction. Okay, I'm going to read this quote from you. This study is titled "Targeting Methionine Addiction of Cancer Cells with Methionase." That's the anything ASE is an enzyme that breaks down methionine. So they're using an enzyme to break down methionine to get it out of the system as a target strategy to try to prevent cancer cell growth. Okay, here's the quote from that study. All types of cancers are addicted to methionine, which is known as the Hoffman effect. We even have a name for this pathway. It is so well known in the oncology and scientific community. It's called the Hoffman effect.
And who was Hoffman?
He's one of the researchers who discovered this process.
Okay.
You can put elevated levels of methionine in with a petri dish with cancer cells, and they will grow like crazy. You remove the methionine and you put any other amino acids, they will starve to death, they will shrink, and they will die.
What if you put cysteine? Then would it turn to methionine and grow?
That's interesting. They looked at that and they said they found that in some of the research that cancer cells can do that, but choose not to. And we're not really sure quite why that is.
Well, that's the Mercer effect, as it's known.
My personal question is it because we are feeding our bodies with all this methionine from an animal-based diet that the cancer cells have said, well, shoot, that's going to be a preferred source. Yeah. They're feeding us this cancer. We can grow. Let's just switch over to that. We won't even make our own methionine out of cysteine anymore.
Right.
That may be what's going on. It's when you send a cell a repetitive signal all the time, a food source, it's going to go to that food source.
And the body becomes dependent.
Exactly. That's why they call it methionine addiction of cancer cells. They're addicted to the food you're putting in your mouth, the animal proteins that are high in this. Okay, so here's the second half of this sentence, direct quote again from this study. Restricting methionine inhibits the growth and proliferation of all tested types of cancer, leaving normal cells unaffected. Okay, so I want to read you this next study, which is going to show what their strategy is. Now that they know this, now that researchers know this, what are they suggesting? So this study is entitled A Review of Methionine Dependency and the Role of Methionine Restriction in Cancer Growth Control and Lifespan Extension. So it's not only is it controlling your body's ability to produce cancers, it's increasing lifespan. Okay, so what is their suggestion? Quote, in humans, vegan diets, which can be low in methionine, may prove to be a useful nutritional strategy in cancer growth control. I couldn't say it any better. If you don't
and
get
you
it
didn't
from
write that, I didn't write that. Some scientist wrote that.
That is a direct quote from the study.
Right.
We know this. It's sad that we know exactly what feeds cancer cell growth. It's sad that we know exactly the diet that could reverse this. We
Right.
even know the methods. We know the method of action. We even have a name for it, the Hoffman effect.
Yeah.
Why
And yet
is this not being communicated?
I wonder how many oncologists in this country, when they give their patients the bad news about cancer and how sometimes it's, stage 4 or stage 5 and the odds aren't good, I wonder how many suggest methionine restriction. I take it from your your reaction, probably very few.
No, because not only are the cancer cells addicted to methionine, the human beings are addicted to methionine. And that's an issue.
Yeah. I think of I had a friend I loved who was diagnosed some years ago with glioblastoma, and that is a very, very, very ominous brain cancer diagnosis to get. And he told me with some hope that his oncologist had recommended a drug called Avastin. So I looked up at the time the prognosis with Avastin. Maybe it's changed since then, but at the time, what it said is for glioblastoma, this has been shown to increase your lifespan from 12 months to 13. And he lived 13 more months. So it just seems to me that if you get a terrible diagnosis, and if the conventional treatments don't have much to offer, why not look to nutritional therapies, methionine restriction leading the way? Even if there isn't all the data that serves as concrete proof, it just seems the wisest path to go, in my non-medical opinion. I'm not a doctor.
And methionine restriction reduce cancer risk, can reverse or apoptize or kill cancers. Methionine restriction by doing a plant-based diet can improve lifespan and can reduce your risk for heart attacks. But it gets better here. And this study is called Methionine Restriction and Cancer Biology. So they started looking at all the mechanisms that happen when methionine restriction happens. And here I'll quote again. Studies have shown that limiting methionine in the diet of animals, including humans, or in cell culture media, that's putting cells in a petri dish, provides metabolic benefits such as decreasing adiposity. That's fat loss. I'm good with fat loss.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people in this country, about 78% of the population, could use a decrease in fat tissue. Increasing insulin sensitivity. What is that? Fighting type 2 diabetes. Okay, now we've got obesity, type 2 diabetes improved, decreasing inflammation, arthritis, cardiovascular disease, hypertension. These are all inflammatory diseases. Decreasing oxidative stress. This is aging process, aging of the skin, aging of the eyes, aging of your hearing. Who doesn't want all this? And of course, the last one, extending lifespan. And of course, then it goes on to say, well, and besides all of those benefits, it may be extending lifespan simply by reducing cancer incidence and overall reduction in cancer mortality, which is dying from cancer. I mean, why would you not want all of those health benefits simply by switching to proteins that are lower in methionine? When I see people posting, oh, you're too low in methionine. It's like, are you kidding me? Too low in something that causes cancer, heart attack, stroke, diabetes, and hypertension? Well, geez, I
Are you
wouldn't want
too
to miss
low
out
in
on
heme
all
iron?
that.
Are you too low in heme iron too, Geoff?
Yeah. But, and then there's this. Methionine is known to trigger the production of what's called IGF-1. It's growth hormone. Okay. So growth hormone is one of the most powerful hormones in the human body, and it's to get our cells, to stimulate our cells to grow. So methionine has an indirect consequence. All of what I talked about is a direct consequence. You reduce the methionine, you get all of these health benefits. But by not reducing or keeping high methionine, you are increasing IGF-1. Now, why does IGF-1? Well, I'll read you the title of this study. Low protein intake is associated with a major reduction in IGF-1, cancer, and overall mortality. Okay, so this was an interesting group because they took high protein intakes. They looked at the highest protein intakes, same amount of grams, say like 200 grams of protein intake per day of animal proteins and 200 grams a day of plant proteins. And they compared them and looked at them in a large population study to see how many people were getting disease states. So the high animal protein diet had a 75% increase in overall mortality, a 400% increase in cancer death, and 500% increase in diabetes. Now, when they looked at the plant-based folks that were eating the same amount of protein, exact same amount, this is the direct quote from the study. These associations were either abolished completely or attenuated if the proteins were plant-derived. Why? Less IGF-1 being stimulated by less methionine. We know that IGF-1 stimulates and causes cancer death risks. We know it exacerbates diabetes. We know this. This is not a guesswork. This is known biology.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Geoff, but you can either get your IGF-1 stimulated by eating flesh foods, or you could get it directly by eating dairy. Is that right?
Dairy is one of the biggest stimulators of IGF-1 production of all. Well, remember, what is it for? It's to help a baby cow go from 30 pounds to 600 pounds. We don't need to grow 600 pounds. Stop drinking something that is made to do that, full of hormones.
It's time that all of us who are vegan say it loud and say it proud. Plant protein is superior to animal protein. Animal protein is inferior because, well, for two reasons that I know of, and you may know of more. But one, it is essentially carcinogenic because of the methionine effect. And two, because it's excessive. And excessive protein does the body no good and creates an acid load that stresses the kidneys. Have I missed any other reasons why plant protein is superior to animal protein?
It's actually not the amount of protein, it's the type of protein. That's what that study showed so well.
But I'm going to claim too that it's the amount. I would rather have protein be a smaller percentage of my calories, let's say 5% rather than 15%. There's the body is not going to, if you're eating a diet that's 15 or 20% protein, what good does it do you? Your body isn't going to store that. Do you agree?
Actually, there was just a study that came out this month. It's called the Dietary Protein Intake in Midlife in Relation to Healthy Aging. So this was a huge study, 48,000 people in the study, and it started in 1984. And they measured protein intake, and those with higher amounts of plant protein increased had a greater odds for healthy aging healthy. That means free of the major diseases. Since 1984 to the present, to 2023, had a 38% chance better, the higher the amount of plant protein.
They were studying people for 40 years?
Yes.
That's a long wait for those scientists to get published.
Tell me about it. That's why I love longitudinal studies. This one was a big study over almost 50,000 people. It was the nurses, the non-as nurses study, so they tracked what they ate. This study has been used by a lot of different people and breaking it down by everything they ate and how they've done it. So these patients and this data has been used in a lot of different research. but they looked at healthy aging in this case, and they found that you could actually, here is the replacement of animal or dairy protein with plant protein. For every 3%, you had up to 58% increase chance of healthier aging.
Okay, now that study confirms that plant protein is superior, but does
By
it
far.
also confirm my other point that excessive protein is a problem?
But what is excessive? That's a good
Well,
question.
let's say 20% of your calories is protein.
Actually, gorillas eat around 25% of their calories as protein.
What percentage do you eat?
Now, humans have a different digestive. We
I
have
wasn't
different
talking about
activity levels.
gorillas.
No, mine is about 10 to 15%.
Okay, it's 10 to 15. So my point is, aren't you healthier? Isn't it better for your health to have 10 to 15% of your calories as protein than say 25%?
Depends on your activity level. Because
You're a bodybuilder.
yes, that's why I'm saying for
Yeah.
me,
So
it's
if you're a
different than you.
bodybuilder and you do just fine with 10 to 15, how big would you build your body to get to 25? I mean, what's the point of it, right?
No,
Let's assume you right now you're 10 to 15% of your calories is protein and you are a national champion bodybuilder. Let's say you don't want to get any more muscular than you are now, which is plenty muscular. I have challenged you to an arm wrestle as soon as I finish recovering from my hernia surgery from a year ago. Um, but let's assume you're not trying to get even bigger in terms of your muscles, and you're at 10 to 15% protein. And I say, Geoff, I want you to eat more high protein plant foods, more legumes, I don't know, nutritional yeast, anything you can think of that's high in protein. Pour on that, take some protein powders, pour it on. Would it be good for you to increase to 25 or 30% of your calories as protein? I say no. What do you say?
based upon the research, um, what I'm saying is that we're not seeing a detriment even at higher increases of protein as long as it's plant protein, particularly whole food plant proteins. So remember, the plants like beans or nuts or grains or greens, the protein content comes with antioxidants, fiber, polyphenols, phytonutrients. These are all cancer protective. These are all cardiovascular protective. So increasing the protein from plants, you're getting all these other
Yeah.
increases going on too as well. That's why it seems to offset, and you don't see any issues in studies so far. And just the converse, the higher amount of plant proteins, the healthier aging people are doing.
Right.
That's
Well, I
shown in the
think that's
studies.
largely because the studies are going to pick up on people who eat more plants versus more animal foods. And there they're going to see all the benefits on the side of plants. What I'm saying probably hasn't been studied, which is what if what if two people are vegans and they're both eating a whole food vegan diet, but one of them gets 10% calories as protein versus the other one gets 25% calories as protein? How would they do? And that study, I doubt, has been done. I don't think we know the answer to that, but I have a suspicion that you're better off with 10% of your calories as protein than 25%, just because I don't think that excess protein serves a purpose. So that's my suspicion. I can't prove it. Um, and uh, and there are some studies that are never going to be done, and that's probably one of them. But do you agree that we should all of us vegans should say it loud and proud? Plant protein is superior.
There's no doubt in my mind that there's overwhelming amount of research with all these different pathways: heme iron, methionine, TMAO, IGF-1. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Even they've shown our microbiome changes And our microbiome can trigger different things too, as well. It can be implemented in disease states. You can take an apple and put it into the microbiome of a vegan who's been vegan for a while, and it will have a different glycemic index in their bloodstream than someone who is not. The same apple. So we used to think, oh, an apple's an apple is going to have the same glycemic index response for everyone. Now we know that is 100% not true.
So when you come across a chart of the glycemic indices, I guess I should say, of foods, take it with a grain of salt. Agreed?
Agreed. It varies by person. And because the research was never done inclusive of vegans because they didn't have any information to compare it to. It was all done on standard American diet folks, omnivore folks. So that's all they saw. So that's all they thought was real.
Right.
And
Let's
now
take a quick commercial break and we'll be back with Geoff Palmer.
All right, if you've ever wanted to show off your plant-based lifestyle and do it in style, here's your chance. We have some of the most amazing t-shirts, hats, accessories, coffee mugs, and more at shop.realmeneatplants.com. We have statement t-shirts that will bring a smile to everyone's face. I love the I Want Tofu Tonight tee. Plus, we have podcast tees, Real Women Eat Plants gear, Real Kids Eat Plants, and Real People Eat Plants, just in case men, women, and kids didn't cover it all. Yeah, we love you and love that you want to show off that healthy lifestyle of yours. Again, check out our high-quality gear at shop.realmeneatplants.com and enjoy.
We are back with Geoff Palmer, the founder of CleanMachineOnline.com and a national vegan bodybuilding champion. Geoff, let's talk for a moment just about nutritional studies in general. And you spend a lot of time reading the literature, and their relationship to the vegan community. Because, for example, I will see a study that shows, let's say, that fish, omega-3s from fish, people who eat a little more fish have a lower risk of cardiac death, of sudden cardiac death, I should say. And there seems to be some protective benefit of omega-3s to prevent sudden cardiac death. So you can read that study and you can say, oh my goodness, maybe I should have some fish because it seems to have some protective effect. Well, it's a study on the American population. So it's people eating fish versus cheeseburgers. And yes, it seems to be the case that having salmon is better than having cheeseburgers. But it's not a study of people eating fish versus you and me, Geoff. So when I see studies like this, there are no studies that show a protective benefit to fish versus vegans who have flaxseed, for example, for their omega-3s. So when you see nutritional studies, it always feels to me like they often should have a big asterisk that says, in the population of people eating the standard American diet, does not necessarily apply to people eating healthy human food. What's your opinion?
Totally. So it's multifold. One, compared to what? Yeah. Yes, did it improve a little bit? But if you actually were plant-based, you could have improved a lot more.
Right.
But they weren't looking at that in the study. So yes, they improved a little bit because you've substituted a healthier animal protein than a more harmful one. So you've taken, it's like one type of poison is really lethal and another poison is less lethal. And if you substitute it, oh, you have health benefits. Well, no, that's not really telling the whole picture there. It's saying that you're doing less damage, not being healthier. So let's not take a false negative or reduction in a negative as a positive. They're not the same. Promoting health is different than doing less harm. So we now know that DHA in fish actually inhibits the cardioprotective effects of ALA, which is found in plants, the omega-3 found in plants. We now know and have human published research that those even consuming fish, if they increase their plant-based ALA, got health benefits above and beyond, 20% more health benefits than those consuming fish. So we need to include plant-based people within the research. We need to include healthy people as the baseline, not unhealthy people as your control group. Let's get back down to worse. No, let's get back down to healthy. Let's use healthy as the control group, non-disease states. But look, our medical system is a disease treatment system. It's taking sick people and trying to make them a little less sick. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to show people how not to get sick to begin with and how to stay healthy and what real health actually looks like, not less sick.
Okay, now getting back to cancer, there is a supplement called IP6 that some people turn to for protection from cancer, or even when they get cancer, as a I don't want to say treatment, but as something they take in the hope that it will help their condition. So tell us about IP6, what has been proven about it, what has not been proven about it, what the indications are for IP6 and what it stands for.
Okay, so let's first discuss what is IP6. IP6 is the abbreviation form that you'll see in studies, and you can type in Google IP6 and cancer. You're going to see a whole list of studies showing how it's been used to treat cancers with great success, as a matter of fact, both in animals and cell studies and in humans. Okay, so what is IP6? IP6 stands for inositol, which is a B vitamin, hexa, which is 6, phosphate. So it's an inositol molecule with 6 different phosphate molecules stuck to it. That's the molecule that's in it.
And what is an inositol molecule?
It is a B vitamin, but once it has all these phosphate molecules stuck to it, it becomes a very powerful antioxidant, but also one of the most amazing anti-cancer agents I've ever read about in any research.
And can you get IP6 by eating certain foods?
Yes, it's very abundant in beans and grains especially, but it's prevalent throughout the whole plant-based kingdom. Even some animal products have a minute amount of it because animals use it from plants too as well to help protect their cells. But many, many fold higher amounts of it in plant products.
Are there any plants that are particularly rich in IP6?
Beans and grains. Those are your 2 best. And I have beans, greens, and grains almost every night for in some sort of combination for dinner every night.
So when I have brown rice at dinner, am I getting some IP6?
You certainly are.
Okay, buckwheat.
Oh yeah, almost all of the grains have it. Now, why do the grains and beans have it? Because they want, what is it? It's a baby plant, right? It's the seed of the plant. They want it really protected from the elements. So they put this powerful protectant agent in the seeds of that. So seeds, nuts, beans, grains, anything that's in a seed form is going to be doing it because the plant is trying to protect its baby before it puts it out into the world and increase its survival rate. But that same chemical helps increase our survival rate too.
Now, not everything that is in food that's good for you is good to ingest in concentrated form. What about IP6 as a supplement? Is it a good idea to take this isolated chemical, this compound that we can presume is a healthy, protective, useful compound, but what about when you take it in an isolated form in a pill?
Yes. So again, because this is a supplement and because the strategy described within the research is using it for cancer, this is something that you should discuss with your physician. This is not us saying that, hey, if you have cancer, go out and take this. No, that is not at all what we're saying. We're saying the research is showing this, and this is something that you should discuss with your physician and show them the research. Because a lot of doctors, a lot of physicians may not even be aware of this research because they're so focused on drug pathways.
Well, can we go directly to the research? Do you have any studies there that you want to tell us about?
100%. Okay, so let's start with iron. Iron is a mineral that we all need to help our blood is built on it. Hemoglobin. Hemoglobin, which is our blood cells, actually comes from the word heme iron. Okay, that's the form of iron that's in our blood cells. It's also the form of iron that's in the blood cells of every animal, fish, chicken, cow, pig, lamb, all of it. Animal flesh has heme iron as its source of iron. Same is used by it. Now, plants protect their iron. Okay, so what is iron? Iron is a metal. What happens when you get a metal like iron wet?
It could rust, Jeff.
It rusts. That's exactly it. That rust is another name we call for oxidation. That's oxygen starting to corrode it, right? And when it becomes corrosive, it gives off these nitrosamines, which are carcinogens. Okay, so when we consume animal heme iron, it tricks our body into thinking, hey, wait a minute, that iron belongs inside my body. Heme iron shouldn't be in the digestive tract. It should only be in my bloodstream. So it rapidly pulls in this heme iron, thinking it belongs in the bloodstream. It does so quickly and so abundantly that it can toxify our bloodstream. It can start rusting or oxidizing in our bloodstream. Not a good thing, because that can start degrading or being caustic to our cells it touches. So what our liver then produces a thing called hepcidin and puts the brakes on it and says, stop pulling in any more of that heme iron. It's toxic. So what happens? That heme iron can't get into the digestive tract for 24 to 48 hours. It's blocking that heme iron from getting in. So meal after meal of eating heme iron can't get into the bloodstream because you produce too much of it too quickly, and now starts oxidizing in the colon. Then it becomes cancer causing. And I will read this to you exactly. The study is called Heme Iron from Meat and the Risk of Colorectal Cancer. This is a meta-analysis and review of the mechanisms involved. So they're looking at a bunch of different studies and reviewing them as a research team. This is the highest quality of studies. It is looking at all of the research and reviewing them as a team, saying, what are the causal effects? Now, this one is actually looking at how heme iron causes colorectal cancer. Quote, heme iron has a catalytic effect on one, the endogenous formation of carcinogenic N-nitroso compounds. Carcinogenic, cancer causing. We know that's one pathway of how heme iron causes cancer directly. Number two, the formation of cytotoxic, damaging to cells, and genotoxic, destructive to the genes. When you change that DNA, what do? You create an aberrant cancer cell, because now with a faulty DNA, it starts spinning off bad cells, cancer cells, and it doesn't have a growth control mechanism in it because the DNA is damaged. Okay, so we know two different pathways and how heme iron blocks itself from getting into the bloodstream, builds up in the colon, and then directly in two different ways causes colorectal cancer. Colorectal cancer is the #2 cause of cancer deaths in men and women in the United States.
Yeah.
behind lung cancer, and that's because of smoking. So it is actually the number one cause of dietary induced cancer deaths in the United States. And we know what stops that. Okay. All right. So we know that heme iron from animals. Look, there's zero heme iron in any plants. Plants don't make it. It's impossible. Heme iron only comes from animals. Heme iron is known to cause colorectal cancer. We even know the exact pathways it causes colorectal cancer. And it's the number one dietary cancer killer of Americans. We know that. So what about plants? Well, plants do something really cool. They attach that IP6, that powerful antioxidant, to their iron. Now, you've probably heard it called phytate or phytic acid. That's another name for IP6. They used to say, oh, plant iron doesn't absorb very well. Heme iron absorbs so much better, right? Plant iron is bound to phytate and prevents it from absorbing. No, it prevents it from oxidizing and causing cancer. Our body sends a cell to say, hey, wait a minute, I need some more iron. Let's knock that off. Our microbiome separates the IP6, allows just the amount of iron that our body needs, perfectly regulated, so you don't get oxidized iron in the gut or in the bloodstream, both of which can be damaging to cells. So this is a beautiful thing, but I want to read these next two studies because it's powerful.
Are these studies on IP6?
Yes.
Go ahead.
All right. The first one is called, study is called Dietary Suppression of Colonic Cancer, Fiber or Phytate. So we know that fiber can have a protective effect against colorectal cancer too. The higher the fiber intake, the lower the risk of colorectal cancer. But is it the fiber that's actually doing it? Or is it just simply because you're eating more plants and all plants, whole food plants have fiber in them? Is it just,
Is it the cause or is it a marker?
Exactly.
Right.
Is it a marker that you're just simply eating more plants? And so this is what they said, quote, herein the authors propose that inhibition or the prevention of intracolonic hydroxyl radical generation, that's a big mouthful for damaging cells, via the chelation or protective effect of reactive iron by phytic acid. This may help explain the suppression of colonic carcinogenesis and other inflammatory bowel diseases by diets rich in phytic acid. Boom, there it is. So it is the IP6, this phytic acid, that is actually preventing the iron from oxidizing, causing a whole bunch of nasty effects, including cancers, but also other inflammatory diseases. Because remember, it's not just cancer. You've got irritable bowel syndrome. You've got all kinds of gut problems. You've got leaky gut syndrome.
Autoimmune diseases.
Autoimmune diseases, where you're allowing bad particles to get in because you've damaged the cells that are along the gut. When you're doing these toxic molecules of oxidized heme iron and it's destroying the cells, it opens up gaps and allows negative particles to get into the bloodstream, causing all kinds of immune issues, right? So it's not just cancer, but that should be enough. Okay, but this next study goes way deep. So that study clearly says, all right, we know this protects against it. And IP6, remember, predominantly found in beans, greens, grains, and seeds and nuts. Okay. All right, so this study goes deeper into it, and it looked at all the different pathways. And it's called Cancer Inhibition by Inoxidil hexaphosphate, IP6, and inositol. From laboratory, this is initial studies, all the way to the clinic, which is in humans. Okay, quote, a striking anti-cancer effect of IP6 was demonstrated in different experimental models. In addition to reducing the proliferation is the reducing the cancer cell growth, IP6 increases differentiation of malignant cells, often resulting in a reversion of a normal phenotype. This is converting a cancer cell back to a healthy, normal cell. That is something that no drug, no pharmaceutical, nothing we know of except IP6 can do. All of the drugs are focused on killing the cancer cell, not preventing it from happening, not changing it back. But IP6 also kills cancer cells. So it can go in there and kill the cell if it's too far gone. It can protect the cell from getting cancer to begin with. And if it does get cancer, it can go inside the cancer cell and turn off that oncogene and turn it back into a normal, healthy cell. Something that no drug or therapy on this planet has been proven to do except plants.
Right. Now, Geoff, we're not giving medical advice here. We're not telling people what to do if they've got a diagnosis. I'm just curious, do you believe personally in taking IP6 proactively? Is that something that you do?
Now, I personally, because I get it so much high quantities in my diet, because I focus on IP6 rich foods as part of my everyday diet, I'm not concerned. If I were to ever, for whatever reason, get cancer, maybe too much sun exposure or radiation or something that's a little bit beyond my control, or done in my youth, then yes, I would use it. I would only use IP6 as a supplement for therapeutic reasons, me personally, and under the advice of a physician or practitioner. So I think taking it in concentrated forms, it has shown no apparent toxic effects at any dosage because it's an antioxidant. It's like, can you OD on something that's good? Probably not. I mean, in way excessive doses, maybe, but not in any normal or even therapeutic doses. It's just shown no toxicity whatsoever. So, and look, the plant does this to protect its own offspring, right? And it does so for our cells as well. Why not just fill your body full of stuff that the plant's already created? I was reading some research on a breakthrough new drug, right? I read the drug things to see what they're doing, what targets they're looking at, which ways they're approaching, trying to come up with prescription drugs. And I was like, breakthrough, the first non-toxic cancer drug. And I'm like, what? I've never heard of that. And I'm like, so it caught my attention and I'm like, okay, almost all cancer drugs work through a toxicity level, something trying to grenade or blow up or kill or destroy, right? It's the anti-cancer effect, right? Go in and kill the thing. So I was like, how's that possible? So I started reading it and it says, oh, it prevents cancer cells from happening. I'm like, a drug that does that? And I'm like, preventative? You don't hear the word preventative in the drug category too often.
Well, they have those vaccines that are meant to prevent
that's true, prophylactic effects. But then it says, oh, can even reverse a cancer cell. And I'm like, wait a minute. I've never read a drug that converts. I started digging deep into it. And sure enough, they basically and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but it looks to me like they've copied the natural IP6 and made a chemical version that does the same thing so that they can patent it and make a drug out of it and make billions.
Wow.
And look, there's nothing wrong with imitating nature. Nature's already got it figured out for us.
Right.
But why not just eat healthier?
That would seem like a good strategy to me. And of course, IP6 is not the only antioxidant out there. You can eat fruits all day long and get plenty of antioxidants.
The whole field of polyphenols is fascinating, and we're just now learning that there's a whole downstream effect, that polyphenols have a direct action themselves, but our microbiome breaks them down into a whole host of other new cool chemicals that also have some even even more powerful effects on us. So these plants are just loaded with different phytochemicals, antioxidants like IP6, polyphenols, and polyphenol metabolites that are just so protective for us. Look, the plant makes these things to keep itself alive. And the plants have been on this planet way longer than human beings have. So they've had a lot of time to figure out how to stay alive. And they are giving us their gifts when we consume them. And we'd be wise to accept the gifts of a species that has long learned how to survive much more than human beings ever have.
On that note, and that is a note of wisdom, I say thank you, Geoff. I always learn from talking with you, and I know our listeners do too. So again, you can find Geoff at cleanmachineonline.com. You could look for him in vegan bodybuilding competitions, and eat your plants.
Yes.
Take care. This has been the Glenn Mercer Show, where everyone listening turns vegan, regains their health, and annoys their friends and relatives. Find us on YouTube at The Glenn Mercer Show and across all your major podcast platforms. Don't forget to subscribe.